At a medical center, a young nurse of color risked everything to save a critically ill homeless man. Her courageous act led to her immediate dismissal by a white director who openly showed his contempt for her. But the director had no idea that the very man she saved was quietly preparing an unexpected way to repay her, one that would change the game entirely and challenge the very system that had been imposed on her. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Jasmine Carter gripped her worn clipboard tightly as the soft click of her nurse's shoes echoed across the pristine white tiles of Riverside Medical Center. In her early 20s, with smooth, coffee-toned skin and deep brown eyes, she looked utterly drained. Her shoulders slumped under the weight of 16 relentless hours on her feet. Fatigue seeped into every muscle fiber, down to her very bones. Dark circles under her eyes were a constant, and a few strands had escaped from her usually neat braids, framing her delicate face. The clock hands had just passed midnight. The hospital corridor stretched out eerily silent, bathed in the pale, indifferent glow of fluorescent lights. The steady, emotionless beeping of machines pulsed from behind closed doors. Jasmine sighed deeply. Exhaustion was not only physical, it weighed heavily on her heart. This month's rent still hung over her head, and her mother's medical bills, covered in confusing lines of text, lay untouched on their small kitchen table. Every shift was a relentless battle, not just against disease, but against the cold indifference of a subtly discriminatory system. Jasmine was all too familiar with the fleeting, dismissive glances and the whispers that died in the air as she passed white colleagues. She was used to the obvious, preferential treatment given to prominent patients, while people of color waited endlessly, some even collapsing in the lobby. She had witnessed this cycle repeatedly, but never accepted it. Nursing was not just a job. It was the fruit of years of tireless study, countless odd jobs to fund her education, and a dream to help others. It was the fragile thread holding her family together. Her meager salary was all she had to care for her aging mother and to dream of a day free from the burden of debt. Each day reminded her of this injustice. Suddenly, a faint groan reached her ears, weak as a whisper through a crack in the door. Jasmine froze, brow furrowed, listening. Not far off, a figure slumped just inside the hospital's automatic doors. Her heart pounded. A surge of unease dispelled the last traces of fatigue. She rushed forward. It was an elderly white man, his silver hair matted with sweat. His face was ashen, and he was breathing shallowly, convulsing slightly. He clutched his chest, eyes almost closed, lips trembling. "Help, please," he rasped, the words barely audible. His clothes were rumpled and stained, a worn-out suit jacket hanging loosely over a wrinkled shirt, a testament to days, perhaps weeks of neglect. His shoes were scuffed, and a faint, stale odor clung to him, suggesting he hadn't had a proper wash in some time. Beside him, an old leather wallet lay open, revealing a new, valid, but crumpled insurance card. "Henry Lawson?" Jasmine murmured, reading the name on the card, her voice catching. Another one. The familiar dread settled in her stomach. How many times would she see this? Just then, Linda, the night receptionist, with her hair in a tight bun and a practiced smile, appeared. The cheap perfume she wore assailed Jasmine's senses. Linda's eyes swept over Henry, then settled coldly on the crumpled insurance card. "His insurance is currently suspended temporarily due to a financial dispute between the hospital and the insurance company, Miss Carter," Linda said sharply, her voice void of any concern for the man's life hanging by a thread. "Hospital policy forbids admitting patients in this situation." Blood rushed to Jasmine's head, a fiery sensation rising in her chest. No, not again. She had seen it too many times. Wealthy white patients rushed straight into emergency rooms without question. Now, a dying man was being refused over a piece of paper. Administrative procedure twisted into an invisible wall, erected by white staff and management to maintain a subtle racial divide, deciding who had the right to live and who did not. An old ache gnawed at her. The image of her little brother, pale with fever, innocent eyes full of hope looking at her before fading away due to delayed treatment. The scene flashed vividly as if it happened yesterday. a scar that would never heal. She would never let it happen again. Never. Yet, as the weight of the moment pressed down, a fierce internal struggle ignited within Jasmine. She knew the cost of defying protocol. Her job, her sole income source, hung precariously by a thread. Losing it meant plunging her mother and herself into deeper hardship. Unpaid rent, mounting bills, and the gnawing fear of homelessness. Every step forward to save Henry was a step closer to losing everything she had fought so hard for. Fear clawed at her resolve, whispering warnings of ruin and regret. But beneath the fear burned a fiercer flame, the voice of conscience, louder than any threat, calling her to act. Jasmine took a deep breath, eyes blazing with fierce determination. She looked directly at Linda. "He needs immediate emergency care," Jasmine said quietly but firmly. This was the line in the sand. Without waiting for a response, she bent down and used the last of her strength to lift Henry. His weight pressed heavily against her, but Jasmine's resolve was heavier. She strode toward the emergency room, leaving Linda frozen, face pale with shock. "Miss Carter! You're violating hospital policy. You'll lose your job," Linda shouted from behind. A few nurses in the waiting area looked up, their eyes a mix of curiosity and fear. Tom, a white colleague, stepped in to block Jasmine's path, but she brushed his arm aside. "Move," Jasmine growled, her face tight with strain. Her steps were decisive, Henry's ragged breathing urging her faster. Blood pounded in her chest, threatening to burst. There was no turning back now. Jasmine felt the weight of injustice crashing down. Henry was not to blame. He was a wealthy, successful man, yet subject to the cold indifference of a system caught in financial disputes. She knew that without immediate intervention, Henry would be abandoned, his fate in grave danger. Without hesitation, Jasmine called over her comms to the on-call doctor, her voice urgent. "Dr. Lee, suspected unstable angina case at main entrance, valid insurance but temporarily suspended due to financial dispute, urgent assistance needed." Dr. Lee appeared swiftly, checking Henry's vital signs. He spoke gravely. "There are clear signs of critical condition. By medical ethics and EMTALA law, patients in this state must receive immediate emergency care. Insurance issues can be settled afterward. Get him into ER now." Jasmine and the medical team swiftly assisted Henry inside. She helped administer fluids, keeping him calm through the intense pain. Doctors and nurses coordinated an ECG, urgent blood tests, and continuous vital monitoring. Pressure weighed heavily on Jasmine. Exhausted, sweat streaming down her forehead, heart pounding, but every second counted in Henry's life or death struggle. As he slowly stabilized, Jasmine glanced toward Linda with a look that spoke volumes. She understood that she was fighting not just rigid rules, but a system steeped in prejudice and coldness. But for Jasmine, no life could ever be left behind. The next morning, the air at Riverside Medical Center was thick with tension, a stark contrast to the deceptive calm of the night before. Jasmine felt the weight of countless eyes on her the moment she stepped inside, heavier than the exhaustion already settling into her aching shoulders. She had stayed awake all night, alone tending to Henry Lawson after rushing him into the emergency room. Every breath, every heartbeat of his had tethered her to the vigil. It wasn't until dawn broke and the morning nurses came to relieve her that she reluctantly stepped away, only to begin her new shift. Physical fatigue intertwined with an overwhelming sense of dread. She knew what was coming. As expected, Richard Caldwell, the hospital director, was waiting. A white man with a stern face and eyes cold as ice. He had already received Linda's report, painted in sharp, malicious detail. Caldwell summoned Jasmine not to a private office but to the main lobby where staff bustled about. This was no mere meeting. It was a show of power, a message broadcast loud and clear. He stood tall, eyes scanning Jasmine from head to toe with unmistakable contempt, as if she were filth crawling from the gutters. "Miss Carter," Caldwell began, his voice sharp and cutting, "your actions last night flagrantly violated hospital policies. We have received a detailed report from Ms. Linda and several witnesses. Such insubordination is unacceptable, especially from someone like you. someone who should be grateful for the position she holds here. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the gathering crowd, a smug smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. In his mind, this was a golden opportunity. He recalled his father's words, etched deep into his conscience. Success belongs only to the worthy, Richard. The weak, the unworthy, and those of lesser standing are nothing but trouble. Growing up in a privileged white family, where power and status were lifeblood, Caldwell had watched his renowned surgeon father endure a lengthy lawsuit from a poor family of color. Though victorious, the trouble had left a permanent mark of disdain. Caldwell's hatred for anyone daring to challenge the established order was born there. Riverside, in his eyes, was a fortress of excellence, no place for those who act on low, emotional whims like Jasmine. Then, with icy clarity, he declared, "This hospital is building a new standard, an empire of efficiency and prestige, where discipline reigns and everyone knows their place, and clearly you are not part of that vision. You are hereby terminated." But Caldwell's disdain didn't end there. His words dripped with venom as he revealed the deeper prejudice that fueled his vendetta. "We build Riverside for the worthy, those with intellect, discipline, and the right skin color." His voice was low but sharp, slicing through the stunned silence. The implication was unmistakable. The weight of his words slammed into Jasmine like a physical blow. She felt blood rush to her head, ears ringing, her skin prickling with shame and rage. Around her, colleagues' eyes stabbed like needles, whispered comments. People like her don't belong here. Typical troublemaker, a black woman causing problems, hung thick in the air. Linda stood nearby, a triumphant smirk playing on her lip. Jasmine caught the averted eyes of white nurses, who looked away as if afraid of contamination by trouble. The black staff who dared meet her gaze did so with sorrow and helplessness, trapped under the same oppressive shadow. A hot tear welled in Jasmine's eye, but she bit her lip, swallowing the urge to break. "No," she told herself fiercely, "I will not let them see me falter. I cannot let their hatred win." Drawing in a steadying breath, she bottled her pain deep inside, leaving only pride and defiance shining in her eyes. Marcus Green, the hospital's gentle-faced black security guard, approached quietly and offered his support. His eyes held sorrow and awkwardness as he guided Jasmine from the hospital. Each step down the stairs felt like sinking deeper into an abyss. Years of relentless studying and working multiple jobs, all to wear that white coat, to help those in need, now seemed to vanish. The hospital doors slammed shut behind her, severing the last connection to the hope that had sustained her. A crushing loneliness and despair engulfed the young nurse, heavy enough to suffocate. Back in her cramped, dimly lit room, Jasmine collapsed onto the worn bed. The stale air smelled of mildew and neglect. The single window barely let in any light, casting shadows over dusty, faded belongings. Financial pressure pressed down like an immense weight. Losing her nursing job meant losing her primary income, the means to pay rent, buy medicine for her aging mother, and chip away at the growing mountain of student loans. The empty kitchen was a stark reminder she hadn't afforded fresh food in days. Hunger gnawed at her, throat dry and tight, unable to swallow a single bite. Tears burned warm as they traced down her cheeks onto the faded pillowcase. The price she was paying was too steep, a price she never should have had to pay. Do I regret it? The question hovered in her mind, fleeting and unwelcome. No, absolutely not. She closed her eyes, the flicker of Henry's fading gaze and her brother's agonizing death flashing vividly, alongside her mother's labored cough from the next room. Those memories, the pain, didn't break her. They fueled a stubborn flame, a summons from conscience and justice. She had done the right thing. Though drowning in grief and humiliation, that stubborn spark burned fiercely within her. Jasmine was determined not to fall, not to succumb. She was fighting not only for herself, but for the forgotten, for the neglected victims of a rotten system. Pain and disgrace pressed down, but the fire of resilience blazed on, leaving her alone in the storm, undaunted, unyielding, and certain she had made the right choice. The days that followed blurred into a suffocating spiral of exhaustion. Her cramped rental room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage trapping her soul. She tried finding new work, but every door slammed shut the moment Riverside was mentioned. Her meager savings dwindled. Each passing hour was a harsh reminder of mounting debt and her mother's declining health in the next room. She lay awake, the weight of her sacrifice pressing down. But, even in her darkest moments, an unexpected spark of hope flickered. One quiet afternoon, Jasmine sat numbly on her old armchair, staring blankly out at the dilapidated communal yard, when her phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. "Jasmine, is that you?" A hoarse but vital voice rang out. "This is Henry Lawson." Jasmine was stunned. He's alive. He remembered. She hadn't thought he'd survived, let alone contacted her. Unexpected joy mixed with confusion. "After being saved, I regained consciousness," Henry explained. A mix of guilt and gratitude compelled me. Though still weak, I persistently asked the nurses, and despite their reluctance, I finally learned the story of a brave nurse who risked everything to save me and was fired shortly after. He owed her. He couldn't let this stand. "I am so grateful to you, Jasmine." Henry's voice was sincere, echoing through the phone. "You saved my life. I couldn't stand by and watch you suffer because of it. I want to meet you as soon as possible. Can you come to lawyer Thomas Reed's office tomorrow morning? He's the one I trust to clarify this matter." A small light flickered in Jasmine's heart, a fragile ray of hope. This call wasn't just an invitation, it was an unexpected lifeline. She was grateful to Henry, but in her deepest thoughts, a heavy anxiety still weighed on her. Was this real? Or another trap? She had lost everything for that action, and now she was being drawn into another, much larger battle, one that could strip away what little honor she had left. The next morning, clutching a fragile thread of hope, Jasmine arrived at Thomas Reed's law office. It was an old, stately building in the heart of the city, a world away from the slum where she lived. The lobby gleamed with marble floors, oil paintings hung on the walls, and the scent of fresh coffee wafted from the elegant reception desk, a stark contrast to her impoverished reality. Henry Lawson was already waiting for her in a spacious conference room. Beside him sat a distinguished middle-aged man with sharp, confident eyes. That was lawyer Thomas Reed. Henry, though still a bit weak, exuded a quiet composure and subtle power, unlike the distressed figure she'd found that night. "Hello, Jasmine," Henry said, smiling warmly. "I'm so glad you came." He introduced Thomas Reed, and the lawyer shook Jasmine's hand respectfully. "This young woman saved my life, Thomas. She deserves justice." Henry looked directly into Jasmine's eyes, his gaze conveying more than his lips could express. He saw her. Not just a nurse, but someone who stood for what was right. "You're probably wondering why someone who was once so desperate, collapsing at the hospital gates, can be sitting here now," Henry said, his voice deep but hinting at hidden meaning. "This life is full of injustice. I was once a powerful political lobbyist in Washington, D.C., with countless connections and the ability to influence important decisions. But then, I fell gravely ill and went through a bitter divorce, losing all my assets, status, and career. I lost everything, and even those who once called me friends abandoned me. Now, I have only what you see, and a fading reputation, but enough for me to know how to work with people like Thomas here. He had lost everything too, but he still had his mind, his connections, and now a purpose. Caldwell thinks he can crush anyone, but he picked the wrong person." Henry's voice, though gentle, carried an undeniable resolve and strength. He would make Caldwell pay not just for himself, but for Jasmine. Thomas Reed nodded in agreement, presenting a thick stack of documents. "We've gathered quite a bit of information about Riverside, Ms. Carter, not just about Mr. Lawson's case, but many other things, too." Thomas's eyes held a shrewd glint. This wasn't just a simple case. It was a chance to bring down a corrupt system. The eyes of Henry and Thomas were filled with determination. Jasmine understood that this was not just an empty promise, but a declaration of war, a chance to fight back, not just for herself, but for all the others. A sliver of hope mixed with trepidation settled in her heart. The legal battle, led by Thomas Reed, began. His law office became the headquarters of a quiet resistance. Every day, Jasmine spent hours there, poring over documents and reports with Thomas and Henry, searching for cracks in Riverside Medical Center's perfect facade. Henry, with his seasoned experience as a lobbyist, showed them how the system worked. He not only provided financial support but also acted as a strategic mind, a seasoned advisor guiding Jasmine carefully every step of the way. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, guiding this young, brave woman. Henry introduced Jasmine to several independent investigative journalists, people unafraid of Caldwell's power. They began to dig into the allegations of discrimination at Riverside. The clandestine interviews, the sleepless nights gathering evidence, and even anonymous threats gradually became part of their new lives. The pressure mounted, but Jasmine was no longer alone. She felt a network of allies forming, people harmed by the same system, now finding strength by standing together. A strange camaraderie bloomed, born from shared injustice. The legal and media campaign, orchestrated by Jasmine, Henry, and Thomas, began to send the first tremors through Riverside Medical Center. Local newspapers, initially hesitant, now started publishing short articles about new allegations against a prestigious hospital. The investigations began to uncover uncomfortable truths, not just about discrimination, but also about systematically covered-up medical malpractice that affected both white and non-white patients, but only people of color bore the consequences and were blamed. Director Caldwell couldn't sit still. He was furious to see his empire shaken by a fired black nurse and a homeless old man. How dare they? Caldwell and his department quickly launched a smear campaign. They denied all allegations, falsely accusing Jasmine she's just a troublemaker exploiting the situation to gain notoriety, a hospital spokesperson declared on the news, their tone full of contempt. A storm of public opinion drowned her in doubt. Caldwell also convened an emergency press conference, his face full of fury and arrogance. He once again denied all allegations, calling them baseless smear campaigns by those seeking profit and to destroy the hospital's reputation. He emphasized Riverside's clean and reputable record, using all his connections to pressure major TV stations and newspapers to remove news or publish information favorable to the hospital. The strong backlash was such that many reporters who initially supported them began to back down. He wouldn't let his legacy be tarnished by such inferiors. Pressure from Caldwell wasn't limited to the media. A series of surprise inspections and investigations from medical regulatory bodies began targeting small hospitals and clinics connected to Henry Lawson's family or Jasmine's supporters. Jasmine's mother's medical records were also mysteriously leaked, accompanied by malicious rumors about her condition, aiming to put further psychological pressure on her. Jasmine's rental room was broken into. Though nothing significant was stolen, it was enough to instill fear. This was a warning, a clear message: stop, or the consequences would be severe. "We need to be more careful," Thomas said during a private meeting, his face grim. "They're playing dirty and they have enormous resources." Thomas felt the weight of responsibility. He had to protect them. Henry nodded, his eyes still resolute but with a hint of worry. "Caldwell will do everything to protect his empire. We've poked a hornet's nest." He knew Caldwell's type. They wouldn't back down easily. Caldwell leaned back in his leather chair, a triumphant smile on his face. "Done. That girl's been silenced." Just when Caldwell thought he had extinguished the flame of resistance, a shocking video expose unexpectedly went viral. Jasmine Carter, guided by Henry Lawson and Thomas Reed, had spent weeks working in secret. She contacted former patients who had been denied care or unjustly treated by Riverside, persuading them to share their stories. Using her old phone and a small portion of Henry's savings, Jasmine personally filmed discreet interviews and recorded testimonies from brave former employees who agreed to speak out while remaining anonymous. Suddenly, Caldwell's phone vibrated wildly. "What the hell is it?" he snapped, picking up. "What? What video? Be clear!" His face transformed from nonchalance to ashen, then purple with rage. He slammed the phone onto the desk, glass shattering. "Damn it, impossible. How could this happen?" In her cramped rental room, Jasmine sat before an old computer screen, her heart pounding. She clicked the upload button. Henry Lawson and Thomas Reed stood beside her, their eyes tense, watching. "It's done," Jasmine whispered, her voice hoarse. She looked at Henry, then Thomas. "They won't be able to take it down now." A mix of terror and exhilarating triumph surged through her. This was it. All or nothing. Henry placed a hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "You're so brave, my dear. Now, let's see what kind of storm brews." He felt immense pride, like a father watching his child take a monumental step. Thomas nodded, clutching the stack of documents in his hand. "Caldwell will be furious, you'll see. He's not used to being exposed like this." He knew this would shake the foundations. This was more than just a legal battle now. The commotion began. From angry phone calls, social media comments, to the first headlines on online news sites. "Do you see, Jasmine?" Thomas pointed at his phone screen, where a video of a protest outside Riverside was live streaming. "They're hearing us." A sense of vindication, seeing the public finally awaken. Jasmine looked at the angry faces, the signs demanding justice. Tears welled up. "They're not alone anymore." She wiped her tears. "We're not alone anymore." A wave of profound relief washed over her. The burden was shared. The whispers were now roars. Caldwell's office became a battleground. He yelled into the phone, vowing to pull strings, his face contorted in a mask of fury. "Take it down, immediately, at any cost." He slammed his fist onto the table, documents scattering. "A lowly nurse and a homeless old man dare challenge me? I will crush them." His control, his carefully built reputation was crumbling. He felt exposed, humiliated. Linda, the night receptionist, trembled, cowering in a corner. Her eyes were filled with terror as she witnessed Caldwell's rage. She knew what he was capable of, and now she feared his downfall almost as much as his power. Jasmine read the social media comments. "She's a hero. Riverside must pay." Every word of encouragement was a small flame lighting her heart. This was what she fought for, the voices of the unheard. Thomas received constant calls. "They're demanding an investigation, a full investigation." He looked at Jasmine, a faint smile playing on his lips. "The game has begun, Miss Carter." The real work was just starting, and he was ready. Henry leaned back in his chair, exhaling a sigh of relief. "Finally, justice has spoken." He looked at Jasmine, his eyes full of pride. "You did it, my dear." His life had meaning again, through her courage. Jasmine smiled, the first genuine smile in days. "Not yet, Henry. This is just the beginning." She clasped his hand tightly. "The real fight is still ahead." She felt empowered, ready for whatever came next. The shock from the investigative report and the wave of public outrage pushed Director Caldwell to a dead end. He had no other choice but to face it. Under relentless pressure from public opinion and civil rights organizations, an official investigation into Riverside Medical Center was launched, leading to a class-action lawsuit against the hospital and Caldwell. Jasmine Carter, as the main plaintiff, became the focus of the case. The trial proceeded in an atmosphere of intense tension. The courtroom was packed with reporters, social activists, and concerned citizens. Caldwell, with an unnervingly calm demeanor, appeared with a formidable team of lawyers, who sought to distort the truth and attack Jasmine's credibility. They presented sharp arguments, attempting to prove that Jasmine had violated hospital procedures, acted unprofessionally, and had personal motives. They even exploited Jasmine's mother's health condition, implying that she was desperate for money. Caldwell felt a cold fury, but a flicker of fear, too. He had underestimated them. Jasmine was the first to testify. Under the glaring lights and scrutinizing eyes, she recounted the details of that fateful night, every word truthful and full of emotion. She didn't shy away from difficult questions, didn't hide her hardship, but turned it into a testament to injustice. Her voice trembled as she spoke of her brother's death, of the system's indifference, but her resolve was strong and clear as she recounted the moment she decided to save Henry Lawson. Every word was a raw piece of her soul, laid bare for justice. Thomas Reed skillfully guided her. exposing the loopholes in the hospital's testimony and the fabricated evidence that had been created to slander Jasmine. He felt a deep respect for Jasmine's unwavering courage under pressure. After Jasmine, Henry Lawson took the witness stand. His calm demeanor, coupled with his story of once being an influential figure, added significant weight to his testimony. He recounted his near-death experience, the discrimination he endured, and his profound gratitude for Jasmine. Standing there, telling his truth, he felt an immense weight lift. This was his contribution, his way of fighting back against the system that had almost taken everything. His testimony, collected and convincing, dealt a powerful blow to Caldwell's credibility. All eyes were on the judge. Jasmine sat upright, her hand tightly clasped in Henry's, feeling his strong pulse. She looked at Thomas Reed, the lawyer, maintaining his usual composure, but anticipation showed in his eyes. Across from them, Director Caldwell sat with an unreadable expression, but his clenched jaw betrayed his inner tension. He couldn't breathe. This was the moment of truth. When the judge read the verdict, the entire courtroom held its breath. Based on the evidence presented and the testimony of all parties, the court finds Riverside Medical Center and Director Richard Caldwell guilty of discrimination and serious violations of medical regulations. The pronouncement hit Caldwell like a thunderbolt, his face turning ashen. His world, his carefully constructed empire, was collapsing. Regarding the case of Mr. Henry Lawson, Riverside Hospital must compensate him for damages and incurred medical expenses. Regarding the case of Miss Jasmine Carter, the court orders Riverside Hospital to reinstate her position and compensate her for all lost income and damage to her reputation. Cheers erupted in the courtroom. Reporters scrambled to write, cameras flashing continuously. Jasmine felt a stream of hot tears run down her cheeks, not tears of weakness, but of profound happiness and liberation. It was over. The weight was finally lifted. Justice, real justice. She turned to embrace Henry and Thomas, the people who had stood by her in this battle. This victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to all those who had been trampled, forgotten. Henry, in Jasmine's embrace, felt a profound sense of peace. His suffering, her courage. It all led to this, a new beginning. Thomas, watching them, allowed himself a rare, triumphant smile. This was why he became a lawyer. To fight for moments like these. Immediately following the verdict, Director Caldwell was forced to resign under immense pressure from the hospital board and the public. His face grim, he walked out of the courtroom, his once imposing figure now appearing strangely small and defeated. The corridors, once bowing to his presence, now buzzed with the whispers of his downfall. He entered his car, the silence a stark contrast to the cheering he imagined ringing in his ears, and stared blankly ahead. It was all gone. His legacy, his power, shattered by a nurse he dismissed as nothing. The hospital's reputation was severely damaged, and it underwent a major restructuring, firing numerous high-level employees involved in the misconduct. Jasmine and Henry's case paved the way for many other lawsuits, exposing more hidden corners of the unjust healthcare system. Jasmine's life embarked on a new chapter, but it wasn't necessarily easier. Riverside Medical Center, though reformed and having issued a public apology, still carried remnants of the old system. Jasmine returned to her nursing job, but she knew she wasn't the same person. Her eyes saw through even the slightest injustices, and she didn't hesitate to speak up. This made some old colleagues uncomfortable, leading to hesitant, distant glances. But there were others, especially other black nurses and younger staff, who looked at her with admiration and respect, seeing her as a beacon of change. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a voice, a symbol, and that came with its own weight. Jasmine dedicated more time to her mother. With the compensation money, she ensured her mother received the best medical care, taking her to top specialists. Witnessing her mother's gradual recovery, a rare smile gracing her lips, was Jasmine's most precious reward. This was the true victory, the one that mattered most. She also allocated a portion of the money to support organizations fighting for healthcare equality, especially for black patients and staff who faced unfair treatment. She didn't want anyone else to go through what she and Henry had experienced. The relationship between Jasmine, Henry, and Thomas deepened, becoming like family. They met regularly, not just to discuss other cases, but also to share everyday stories. Henry, with his calm demeanor and profound knowledge, became a mentor, a spiritual father to Jasmine. He shared his experience on how to cope with pressure, how to maintain faith when everything seemed to crumble. He found his purpose again, in nurturing the fire of justice in others. Thomas Reed, the talented lawyer, continued to represent similar lawsuits, and Jasmine often assisted him with her deep insights into the healthcare system. He felt a profound sense of satisfaction, knowing he was truly making a difference, one case at a time. Despite achieving justice, Jasmine still understood that the battle was far from over. Prejudices and injustices deeply ingrained in society couldn't be changed after just one trial. However, she no longer felt alone. She had Henry, Thomas, and an entire community yearning for change behind her. Every day, Jasmine strived to live and work with a greater purpose. She became an inspiring speaker, sharing her story at universities and conferences, igniting the flame of hope in young hearts. The fear had faded, replaced by an unshakable resolve. Jasmine actively participated in social activities. She and Henry Lawson established a non-profit fund, the Justice and Healthcare Equality Fund, aiming to provide legal and financial support to patients and healthcare workers facing discrimination. This fund quickly grew, becoming an important voice in advocating for more equitable policies and overseeing medical facilities. Jasmine frequently stood on podiums, sharing her story at universities, national forums, and community gatherings. Her voice, once stifled, now echoed everywhere, carrying a message of resilience and compassion. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.